Hello everybody, my name's Peter Bonnell. I'm the Senior Curator at Quad and Format. Today we're going to look at the Extra Gallery Spaces exhibition at Quad, curated by my fantastic colleague Laura O'Leary, Quad and Format Assistant Curator. The show that she worked on with the Artistic Director Louise Fedotov-Clement's work that was submitted from an open call from all around the world. And Laura is going to be talking much more than me in depth about these fantastic works that were selected for this version, this part of the festival. Under the theme of Forever Now, going to archives present, in the past, the future, how things are looked at and repurposed by artists and so on. So I'd also like to say a huge thank you to V21 Artspace, who produced this virtual exhibition tour that we're going to use today. And we are in Quad's foyer area. I'm going up into the extra gallery spaces. And what I want to do with many of these exhibition exploration talks that I've done is talk to curators and artists from around the world. And also I really wanted to talk to Laura and get her feedback and opinions and observations about this fantastic show that she did in our extra gallery spaces. The corridor spaces through Quad, but the beautiful way she curated it and put the show together, I think speaks volumes. Hello, Laura. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. Thank you for that very nice introduction, Peter, as always. Yeah, I'm really happy that you asked me to explore this exhibition again with you. This was the first time I'd worked on a Format festival. I've been working at Quad now for 2 years, and it was just amazing to be working with 9 artists from around the world, from South Korea to the US to Mexico to Spain to Germany and further afield. So it was a really exciting process, and I'm happy to talk about these works in the extra gallery spaces. As Peter pointed out, it's a space in Quad which we use regularly for the open call for formats. It's a really great place to highlight the works.
Let's start with this and tell us about this work, Laura.
Okay, so this body of work is called Better Days, and it's by a artist called Seunggu Kim from South Korea, and he lives in Seoul. And just some trivia, the title Better Days actually comes from a Tupac song, and the lyric is, "Time to question our lifestyle, how we live, got me thinking about better days." And the context of this body of work relates to how Korea has been developed rapidly over the past 40 years, and how that development has caused some social ironies. So one of the ironies is very long working hours, but quite short holidays. And so if we scroll round maybe away from the tiger image and kind of go to maybe the second or third image. So what you can see here are documentation of Korean people on holiday, trying their best to enjoy it, but due to the lack of time, they can't travel far, so they make the most of the city. So you can see the collective leisure that revels the attitude of Koreans living with optimism and a sense of community despite social constraints. So if we go to the next image along, we can see a very popular swimming pool, and then go along to the 2 images across. This is a big ice fishing festival in the city. So there's so many different things that go on. The first image is from like a zoo. So you can see this tiger within this field of ice. And then all this work kind of shows like really populated scenes of people on holiday. But the next one along as well is from a flower festival, the amaranth flower. And you can kind of see people having selfies amongst the flowers. But then behind it is this huge cityscape, and then kind of the mountainous regions showing the realities of these kind of holiday scenes. There's the holiday, but in the background there's also kind of work and the pressures and the labour, with also that idea of being on holiday. So it's there's a lot of humour in this work, which is a really great place to start. And they're usually presented at a larger scale, but they were for these spaces they were just presented at a slightly smaller scale.
And one of the themes of Forever Now was that notion of the enduring moment, and these images certainly capture that pastime, that hobby that may well have taken place 100 years before and will no doubt take place, I guess, many years in the future.
This is a body of work by Karl Ohiri, who is a London-based artist. In Karl's work, their personal experiences from his perspective of being a British Nigerian artist, and he explores themes around the notion of family, identity, cultural heritage, and popular culture. So this work, as you can see, is 12 A4 portraits, which all have a QR code underneath, and in each one he's holding a protest sign. And this body of work is called A Year in Protest. So since the 1st of January 2018, Karl has resisted the urge to comment on or take part in any online social political debates. opinions. Instead, he has taken his opinions offline in a series of self-portraits that was scanned by the QR code that directs the viewer to the source of his protest. There's one which says, "Send us back to Africa," which is the last post there. And that would then take us to a Guardian article from 2018, which talks about thousands of African artworks that were taken during the colonial era, but they now are in cabinets in the halls of UK institutions, from the Wallace collection to the V&A. Those points are resonated in these protest signs, and then the QR codes takes you to the source of this activity. And obviously social media is a hive of activity where if you say something, it can go possibly in the wrong direction. And that's something which Karl also talks about in his work. And in total, there's actually 30 portraits. We just showed 12 for this iteration. So Karl has put, "The photographic act provides me with a way of reconciling a suppressed need to create a record that is not objectified to scrutiny or backlash in its moment of capture." So I think that gives you an idea of this work, and it's all accessible. If you want to see a few of these links, you can do that through his websites. But kind of as a series of studio portraits with these very strong messages in a time with the rise of Black Lives Matter, the notion of the protest is just ever present, and it really draws back to these works. And Karl's restaging of protest from his own studio, where all you can see is a gloved hand and no other body, and then it just takes you to these digital sources of news.
I think the black and white imagery gives it a sense of not of being an anachronism, but something that is, again, not to be over tortuous with the metaphors, but an enduring moment, and reminds me of the civil rights movement in the 60s, particularly with placards, even today, of course, and which so prevalent with the Black Lives Matter movement, as you said. So shall we now head up onto the first floor?
So we'll start with these images on the left first, by Maria Sturm. These were much larger printed works, and this body of work is called "You Don't Look Native to Me," which is a quote, and this won the Royal Photographic Society Award. And what we can see here is the Lumbee tribe, and I'll just read a bit about what Maria has done here. So since 2011, Maria Sturm has photographed the unrecognised Lumbee tribe from around Pembroke, North Carolina, where 89% of the population identifies as Native American. Sturm's photographs might appear to depict a community almost anywhere in America, but elements of hybridity signify the mixing of heritage and contemporary culture. There is a clear representation of what one might define as tribal outfit or being part of a tribe. But then if we were to kind of go across to the next image of two people holding hands, the only signifier here would be probably the ring, which again indicates to being part of the tribe. And then the last image, which you can see, also relates to a young man looking at himself, inspecting his own identity. And these are all young people that are still living within a tribe. This body of work is really well documented on Maria's website, and there's a feature of interviews, videos, hearing people from this tribe talk about their culture, the terms in which they live. And there's a quote here from Maria's website which says, "My work engages an unfamiliar mix of concepts, a Native American tribe whose members are ignored by the outside world, who do not wear their otherness or their physique, but who are firm in their identity. I am focusing on an unusual and somewhat paradoxical kind of otherness, one which is not immediately apparent even though they define themselves in this way. Through photography, video and interviews, I'm investigating what happens when social and institutional structures break down and people are forced to rely on their own resources. This raises questions to the viewer regarding one's own identity and membership to the unspecified mainstream." A lot of this is kind of the idea of a perception of what somebody from a tribe may look like, and how it isn't what you'd necessarily expect. And Maria started this body work from 2011, and it continued to 2018 to my knowledge. So now it's IC Visual Lab.
So here we are.
IC Visual Lab is an independent photography organisation based in Bristol, focusing on education and promotion of contemporary art. Its remit is to support the development of photographic practice across all genres and for all audiences. And along with Empire, there's many members in IC Visual Lab. This project was curated by IC Visual Lab's co-founder Alejandro Athin, and a contributor who is a curator also, called Isaac Blease. There was a first project called Alone with Empire, and this is a kind of a new iteration of it, which was first exhibited at Format, and it's called Alone with Empire, the Counter Archive. And it's an interactive display that maps out key elements from IC Visual Lab's recent commission with the British Empire and Commonwealth Film Collection, held at Bristol Archives. So this is the website which people could access when they entered format. So if you press enter, what we have here is over 800 films and over 400 hours of footage from the British Empire and Commonwealth collection in a curated environment, which is this digital way to access the work. And then so when you kind of get past this, you can select any of these archival films and see them and select them and be able to handle these archival footage at your own pace and in your own way. And I guess IC Visual Lab, what they aim to do in their work is they do lots of symposiums, talks and workshops that also activate these archive, but they're about the contemporary uses of archives, and in particular the examination of colonial archives. And they believe by kind of creating access and facilitating participation with the collection, they wanted to create a critical space to reflect about this important collection that is within Bristol. And you can still access this all through IC Visual Lab's website if you want to have a look at this footage. And then if we go down around the corner to Guanyu, and the body of work is called Temporarily Censored Home. And in these works, as we can see, he changes his home, which is family home, into temporary installations. And he queers the space, taking away the heteronormativity of his parents' home. And he says even though these installations are not permanent, Shu feels like he reclaims his childhood's home as a queer space of freedom and of temporary protest. I love these images. He describes them as murals, but I think the detail and what things that you can see in each one.
Well, even though they're large-scale images, as you say, the detail, the intimacy suited this particular part of the space so well, because it's not necessarily a case of forcing you into looking, but you're very close-up, intimate with the images, aren't you? You get enveloped in them.
They're very dense. And they do, as you say, they really adapt the architecture of each space. And I'd really recommend looking at these on Guanyu's website, so you can see them at a large scale and see the detail and just the way in which the collage has been used in this very exciting way. And then we can move on now around the corner. So this body of work is by an artist called Stephen Barritt, who is based in the UK, and it's called Of Swallows and Ravens. His work encompasses portraiture, landscape and constructed narratives exploring recurring themes of humanity's relationships with the spaces it inhabits. So this body work is there's lots to it, and I'm just going to read what he wrote. So, touching on subjects such as quantum mechanics, astronomy and mathematics, this series explores our scientific and philosophical notions of how we define reality. Photography and its relationship to the real is examined and questioned. Ambiguity and mystery are combined with visualization and documentation to create a kind of spectral dissonance. And I mean, for me, there's just, with these work, I think it's how you piece it together. So there's elements of nightscapes, and then there's a VR, there's science labs, these like very highly lit portraits. And there's also on the far left wall, closest to the door, there's this is actually paint pigment, and it's Vanta Black, which is, it's not real Vanta Black, but it is a form of Vanta Black, and that's also a paint derived through science. So it's meant to be the blackest black, and it's developed through NASA software. So there's this real crossover between science, the arts, space, and our understanding.
Fantastic, beautiful work. The quality of images and projects submitted through the open call by these artists there, and the way in which you put the show together in the extra gallery spaces is fantastic, to say the least. Are we going to look at this fabulous work here?
Yeah, so this is by a Spanish artist, Gloria Oyarzabal, and the project is called Woman Go Nogri. It was really exciting working with most of these artists. We work with them remotely, so we send plans via emails and show them these spaces, which are all quite unusual spaces for an artist to exhibit in, being that they're not typical white cube spaces. And it was great working with Gloria because she really took this space as her own, and she's exhibited this work a number of times. It was actually awarded a prize this year, last year, the Mitre Award, and it's just done very well. If we maybe click through, you can see more of the work, which is a mix of manipulated archive imagery and images Gloria had taken. And the series was inspired by research conducted during a residency at the Art House Foundation in Lagos, Nigeria. And she was particularly inspired by reading The Invention of Women, Making an African Sense of Western Gender Discourse by controversial feminist author Yoronke Ayomi. And she is a decolonizing voice that questions the rational theoretical frameworks used to define the parameters of purportedly universal gender category. And I guess that's indicating to what Gloria's work's about, and it's all about decolonizing feminism and processes of manipulation, stereotypes, white privilege, hypersexuality, hypersexualization and beauty. And the title of this exhibition is an adaptation of a Fela Kuti song, so it's instead of being woman go gree, it's woman go no gree, and that's from his Chakra album from 1972. People just wanted to explore the space, and the quality of the printing was beautiful, so you could really see the richness of the colours. There's these ghostly archival prints down here in the big black and white image, and there's all the other imagery manipulated with colour. There's also incredible names for these works. So the curtain work on the left is called Pink Monotheism on exoticization, victimization, hypersexualization, otherization. And actually, I think for this work, it's there's a lot to say about its content, and I just whilst reminded myself about these exhibitions, I saw an online lecture which was with Gloria and Photo Israel, which was only launched last month, so as part of their kind of online program. And that's, so if you just Google Gloria Oyarzabal and the name of this work onto YouTube, it will come up with that link, and she really goes into her processes. And then from there, we can probably move on up the stairs. This is the penultimate work in this 9-artist show. And this is by Garrett Grove, who is a artist based in the US. So Garrett focuses on the emotional tension that stands between the demands of modern life and natural order. A very simple premise, but this body of work unpicks that. So it's called Journey to the Interior, and it focuses on history, identity, and the current state of the concept of the American dream. It's an existential walk through the Western American landscape, looking for clues about what has happened, what has been lost, and where new hope may be found. And it's very dreamlike. This man here is sat in a huge pile of potatoes, very almost absurd, and the next one with the apple on the tinfoil. They're a real gateway into Garrett's experience of this road trip he had around America and what he found. And the photos are taken during the lead up to and following the 2016 presidential election. So again, relating to that idea of the American dream. Maybe that emotion that he felt is also typified in these images. And he's put that I went into these places the intention of understanding something that was apart from myself, and in the process created a picture of America that mirrors my own confusion of navigating a cultural identity that no longer, if ever, worked.
Shall we move on? Moving on to our final.
Yeah. So this is by artist Liza Ambrossio, and it's called The Rage of Devotion. This work, sometimes when you have the pleasure of seeing works being printed, when I was looking at these images, they're so haunting that it was amazing to handle them and actually install them in this, again, a very specific layout of this overlapping of imagery, and that's very specific to how she always hangs her work. There's a lot of overlaps. So Liza is a Mexican artist who lives and works in Madrid. Her body of work combines photographs from her macabre archive and cryptic paintings, performance, intervention, installations, video, psychology, lucid nightmares, science fiction, and witchcraft that come together in free association. This particular work is about an experience that she had. So at 16 years old, she asked a housekeeper from her mother's home to steal photographs from her family photo albums. Liza was looking for a way to survive away from her family's decisions, and her project, The Rage of Devotion, shows these childhood memories alongside chilling early morning scenes in Mexico City and images of her mental and real travels from her own adolescence to adulthood. This exists in a book, so if you're interested in seeing these as a whole, I do feel like it's probably like reading a book. There's definitely a sense of ritual and macabre. This work, I think this idea of witchcraft as well, how she uses people, there's like damage to the body, there's this image of someone emerging out of the water. It is very, as she says herself, free-flowing, and you almost have to piece it together, like the scenes from her life and her imagination, how she perceives her life, which cumulatively work together to create this body of work called The Rage of Devotion.
As you say, the images together and individually are quite disconcerting, but it's such a great space to work in, our gallery spaces, because people go up and down the corridors and get to see things in different contexts and get drawn into these works in so many different ways. So I think we're going to wrap it up there, Laura. Is that okay? Well, what I'll do is thank our funders, Arts Council England and Derby City Council, for their enduring support, and also FORMAT's festival partners, the University of Derby, who add in so much logistical support and funding as well. Laura O'Leary, our Quad and Format Assistant Curator. Thank you so much for doing such a wonderful, insightful, thought-provoking tour of the extra gallery space today. It was really insightful, to say the least. So if you're watching this, everyone, while the pandemic is still on as such, stay safe and well. Laura, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you so much, Peter, and thank you to all the artists.